And then when we talk about hybrid, I guess traditionally hybrid is how do we take personal advice and digitize it? So we have the high touch advisor face-to-face advice mechanism, but it's more of a digital online fact find.
Because general advice is information, you're not understanding the client's situation, but doesn't mean you can't lead them down a particular path.
Dean and I are joined by Ravi Verma from OpenInvest. We're going to unpack it and explore what hybrid advice actually looks like in a practice. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to UncommonCents episode 111. Can you believe 111? There we go, Dane. This is what started off as a pipe dream. We're now 111 in. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a topic that's been talked about for years, but I think it's finally starting to become a reality, and that is hybrid advice. I guess for many advice businesses, there's a growing group of Australians who need help but either can't afford or don't yet need a full comprehensive advice relationship. So the question is, how do we serve those clients profitably, compliantly, and without creating more work than value? So to help us unpack all of that, Dean and I are joined by Ravi Verma from OpenInvest. And today we're going to unpack it and explore what hybrid advice actually looks like in a practice, maybe where advisors are getting it right, where they're getting it wrong, and whether this really represents the next evolution of advice or is it simply another channel for engaging clients. Welcome to the podcast, Ravi.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and unpacking some of those challenges that firms face. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just chatting around what hybrid advice actually is, and certainly my views on that as well.
Absolutely. So let's start us there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the advice gap, although most advisors know about it, but what have you thought about it recently in terms of how it's potentially increasing? Obviously at 30 June, we saw another big drop in advisor numbers. And how is this hybrid advice fitting in, and what are you defining it as in terms of the work that you do at the moment?
Yeah, you're right. I think the recent numbers which just came out on the FAR register show that we were dropped below 15,000 advisors for the first time.
Correct.
So there's a shortage of advisors, obviously, but I don't think the real problem is the advice gap. I think the real problem is the distribution problem. So you're right, Craig, you mentioned millions of Australians needing help, particularly help with investing, but they're being priced out of additional personal advice. We're trying to force them into a model which wasn't really designed for the mass market. I'm talking about people who need help, particularly with investing, but we're trying to shoehorn them into this advice model, which just doesn't work for everyone. So I don't actually think it's a demand issue. It's more of a delivery issue. How can we look at distributing valuable IP to the masses in a more scalable digital means outside of personal high-touch advice? Yes, firms we've been talking to and what we've been looking at as a business over the sort of last 8 years is how do firms utilize tech, scale up, and engage with their own content through an online service. So yeah, so that's I guess my introductory comment on that. But if you think about the way I think about advice firms, they've all got valuable, and I'm going to specifically focus on investments because that's what we deal with at OpenInvest. Most advice firms sit on valuable investment IP. They run really sound investment philosophies. They have their investment committee, which they have a fantastic investment committee charter. They have robust portfolio construction in place. They have great market insights, which sometimes they communicate that to their clients as well. But that's all locked within a high-touch, high-cost service. So I think for me and for us, it's how do we help advice firms unlock that valuable IP and take it out to a wider audience outside of just trying to get everyone into what is essentially one offering, which is personal advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the reality in that, in order for a client to get access to that IP investment portfolio at the end of the day, they have to go through an advice process, which is FSG, fact find, signing a fact find, doing a risk profile, writing a statement of advice to invest money at the end of the day. And I suppose this is an element of this hybrid offering, but by virtue of understanding that those boxes don't always suit the consumer. So some consumers or clients don't necessarily want that offering, but want the investment advice or the investment portfolio. And then there's some clients that it's not economical because they don't want to pay $5,000 for that particular outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. The question for an advice firm is, what's our client value proposition? And currently, most advice firms only have one. If you strip everything away in terms of what they do around advice, they've got one product offering, which is personal advice. And if you don't meet the advice threshold, and these days, most of the firms I speak to, they're not looking to deal with clients with less than 500,000 or $1 million investable assets. So if you don't meet that threshold, or you're not really needing full advice, they can't help you. So the question becomes, how do you complete your client value proposition where you can actually put your arms around a wider audience? You can package up your model portfolios and your content, but you can use tech to deliver that under a general advice product piece or an offering. And therefore you can deal with every single prospect who comes to you, no matter where they are on their wealth journey, because you've got different service offerings. And then when we talk about hybrid means different things to different people. I guess traditionally hybrid is, how do we take personal advice and digitize it? So we haven't got the high touch advisor face-to-face advice mechanism, but it's more of a digital online fact find, online SOA. So that's one element of hybrid. But the other is, actually, I don't feel I need advice. I don't see the value in paying for an SOA. I actually know I've got money to invest, and I've come to you with an intent because I've been referred to you, or my friends or family use you. I don't need advice. I just want to put this money somewhere because it's currently sitting in the bank. So how can you help me? And unfortunately, a lot of the times it's, hey, you've only got 50,000, 150,000, 200,000. Sorry, we can't help you. Come back when you've got more money, which I'm never going to do. Or even worse still, some of the firms I've spoken to, hey, we send them off to Vanguard or beta shares. And I'm like, you're never going to see those clients again. Because once you've sent them to them,
absolutely. And so circling back to that definition of hybrid as you went through, I found it really interesting to highlight that some people might think that hybrid advice is digitizing their current process. And to me, as you were explaining it, I just said that's trying to make your existing business more efficient. That's not deciding to serve a different market under a completely different strategy. Craig and I talk about this, the Jetstar and Qantas kind of thing in other podcasts and work that we do. And just because something's more efficient doesn't mean that it's necessarily meaning that you're changing to a different target market in terms of who you're offering to serve.
Yeah, and then I think from that, and the question I asked, which is probably relevant to actually both of you as an advice business owner, Dean and Ravi, with the space you're working in, but I'm interested in what's actually changed over the last couple of years that's making this more viable than it was, say, 5 years ago. If we go back past that, their robo advice, there was no robots and there was no advice. So I don't know how that went. But something's made this, appeared to make this more viable now than it was 5 years ago. Is it?
Yeah, I think, particularly in what we do at OpenInvest, it's enabling firms to see things from a different perspective, because we're all stuck in our own paradigm, right? So if you're an advice firm, everything you think about in terms of a strategic view on your business is all around personal advice. So I think that's where that old school robo advice, hybrid advice model came in. Whereas hybrid advice is also, for me, general advice. So don't view it as you have to provide an SOA to someone. It's general advice is also advice. And if you're presenting information on your website in a very clear fashion, concise, helping people self-direct themselves into, let's say, one of your model portfolios that you've got on offer through an online investing solution, then that to me is hybrid advice, because you're helping people make their own informed decision through offering clear information.
Yeah. And this general advice, the general advice that you may work with, is that under your AFSL or under the advisor's AFSL?
Yeah, great question, Tim. Essentially, it falls into, it's a bit complicated, but not. So what we do, I think it helps just to position what we do. I know this is not a product sort of discussion, but I think it will help.
The good ones always find a way to sneak it in, though. I like it.
I can put it on mute. We've got to be on. No, please tell us. Put it in context, Ravi, of course.
Go, Ravi, go.
In context, we are an investment platform, and we configure our platform, our legal structure, and I'll come back to that in terms of answering your question, and our operations. We configure all that in the brand of a financial advice firm, allowing them to offer out their model portfolios and their content through our tech. But we do the full administration, the full implementation. Really, that allows the firm then just to focus on their marketing, their website, and managing their models. And we provide the end-to-end sort of customer journey in terms of someone on their website going, yeah, I want to invest in that, and then that just runs through our tech. So in terms of, yeah, that's I think that sort of positions what we do. Yep. And so for firms, it becomes about, they've got a capacity constraint, and then we're just allowing them to digitally scale up via a general advice solution. Just, sorry, what was the question you asked me? I was
just trying to, this concept of general advice has come up recently in a few conversations that I'm having, both in the category of general advice for insurance, which will be another podcast episode, Craig, but also now we're talking about general advice for investments. Just advisors sometimes think about general advice as if it's the worst thing. We've been taught to give personal advice. How could I possibly talk to people about general advice, and how does it work? And so this concept of just the AFSL is only one function of that. But how does an advisor that delivers personal advice, how do they actually give general advice to encourage a client to choose the path that we're talking about today?
Yeah. It was going back to that sort of legal, is it under our license, under their license? So if you think of an advice firm, let's think they've got, most advice firms we speak to and we partner with have got the same challenges. One, we've got prospects coming to us, but they don't meet our advice threshold. We can't really put our arms around them and welcome them into our ecosystem. We're having to show them the door. We've got kids of existing high net wealth clients who we really need to be engaging with and helping, but we don't, again, we can only do that under personal advice. And if we do that, little Johnny's got 50,000 to invest. Ultimately, we're giving that away as a freebie because we're looking after mum and dad, but we really ought not to be. We know the inheritance is going to pass through fairly soon. But if we're not engaged with the adult children of our existing clients, we know there's a high percentage that money's just going to walk out the door. And then the other side is we're working with centers of influence, like accountants, and generally we get a handful of referrals each year. But that's not because the accountant doesn't have faith in the advice firm. It's because the accounting clients fall into that bracket of the mass market of Australians who don't want to pay for advice, but they still need help, right? Investing, they're running their self-managed super funds, they're not really sure what they're doing. So it's those same challenges that keep coming up. So that can only really be delivered in a scalable solution. So the way to deal with that is for an advice firm, when a prospect comes to them, you're just essentially triaging. So you establish what is that the basics of that need. I've got money to invest. Great. Hey, we've got two services. We've got a personal advice service. This is what it is. This is what it entails, what it costs. It's face-to-face. It's really high touch. Or we've got an online investing solution. It's a self-directed solution. It's our team managing ready-made portfolios, but it enables you to jump on our website, choose a portfolio that suits your needs, and you follow your nose. And that's a general advice solution. So in doing that, I haven't given any personal advice to them. I'm just giving options of what services I've got available. So I think what we do is we work very closely with firms to try and help them remove themselves from that personal advice mindset of, oh, I can't say anything to. No, it's how you're triaging people in the first instance to get them into the right service for them. So,
and I think this concept could be part of the solution to there's not enough financial advisors, because the idea that the advice firm is doing some type of triage to work out whether this particular client would benefit from general advice or personal advice is something that's really interesting to me to think through. Most advisors have always just had one solution, which is the personal advice process.
Yeah,
absolutely. Of that, Ravi, is what client segments do you think are the biggest opportunity? Because I know we've got client value proposition, but firms out there will have, this is my where to play market. This is how I win at the moment within a scenario, but it doesn't mean they can't add more where to play markets while utilizing something like this. So what do you think if I'm sitting here as a practice principal, what are the client segments that are my biggest opportunity with this?
Yeah, so the question for any advice firm is, have you segmented your client bank? Who are the most profitable clients? Who are the clients you want to be spending time with? Who are the clients that actually ought not to be in that personal advice model, either because it's too expensive for them, but they've been there, so you haven't moved them, or they're unprofitable for you to serve given your time constraints. And most firms really need to go through that process of segmentation. Now, it's really then freeing up the advisor's time. So the advisor should really be focused on that sort of higher end client. So now then you're going to be left with a cohort within your own client bank who you feel is no longer best suited under the advice model. And so we've done this for firms where you can have a chat to them, write to them en masse, however you deal with it. You can move them into your general advice solution if it's just to do with investing, and still give them a great outcome and experience, because certainly through what we do, you can still communicate. We've also built a publishing platform to marry it with the investment platform. You can post videos, keep them up to date with what's going on in terms of their portfolio under a general advice regime. And so they're still getting this great experience from you. They're still within your wealth ecosystem. They're still able to connect with you and go on that journey. And then when they're ready, or they've got an episode in their life where they need advice, let's say inheritance, you've still got them in your brand. Nothing's stopping you then from later on in switching on a pay-for-service personal advice offering. And that's no different to then looking at outside of what you've already got in your existing database. Who else is out there? What other audiences do we want to try and tap into? And who else can we bring into our online solution, so we can start building a relationship with them earlier and nurturing them, and so they become our future advice clients. So it's almost like the future acquisition cost or the marketing cost. You're bringing them in now, knowing that they are going to grow in their careers, hopefully grow in terms of what they're doing on their online investing solution, have episodes in their life where they need advice. You're going to be the natural partner for that. So yeah, different firms have different needs, and accounting firms is actually a really good example, because I'm sure you guys know this as well. A lot of accounting firms who have integrated wealth divisions, typically only about 10 to 15% of those accounting clients are actually clients of the wealth division as well. So I always question accounting firms, what's happened to the rest of the 90% of accounting clients? If you're not serving them on the investing side, then there's a danger that someone else will be, and potentially they could also offer other services that you offer. You ought to be offering model portfolios, just like you do on your wealth side, on your advice side, to those accounting clients. So there's another sort of cohort. So yeah, it's Craig, it's really varied. Each firm has got we end up in a solution for 35 plus advice firms, and they've all got a slightly different reason for taking out a solution. But for all of them, it becomes a means for them to go, yes, come on in. We've got a means to help you, serve you, build a relationship with you, take you on a journey, and get you a great wealth outcome, no matter where you are on your journey. We don't want to send you away and ask you to come back later when you've got more money. Great experience.
And Ravi, have any of these firms, without you not needing you to mention names, but has this strategy ended up being the bigger part of their business, or is it on track to be as big as their existing businesses?
No, not at all, because it's
no.
I see it as a complementary service to their advice business. For most of the advice firms, I would say no, it's definitely not as big as their advice service. Absolutely not. But yeah, coming back to again, that sort of acquisition cost now, building relationships now, that's really what you're doing. And importantly, it is also a revenue producing part of their business, because the legal structure, which was going back to that question earlier, Dean, which I forgot about, was the legal structure is we are an IDPS like registered managed investment scheme. So when an investor who comes in from ABC advice firm from their website, it's all branded as their service, they're actually joining our scheme. So we actually have the legal responsibility for that end investor. But what it means is the firm are acting as a portfolio manager within our scheme, and therefore they can charge for their portfolio expertise. So not only does it become a means for them to obviously capture future advice clients, it becomes a revenue producing part of their business as well, which is important because they are taking out their investment IP. They are running an investment committee, they're running investment portfolios, they're changing those portfolios, they're communicating through our tech to educate people on what decisions they're making on their portfolio, and they should be rightfully paid for that. But it becomes a great sort of mechanism for them to earn additional revenue whilst also helping people with a great outcome as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we get to the point of the offering in our discussions today about going, what do you want your service offering to be to your target clients? And then, like Qantas starting Jetstar, is like, if you want to have a separate business that is generating revenue and generating profit, it's okay to pause and think about what is the offering legally under general advice, but what is the offering for a second audience of clients that may be your future clients, maybe the clients, friends and family of ideal clients or people around that community? Do you want to go down the path of building an offering to serve that client community under your brand so you can keep control of it?
Yeah. We've got a firm, I won't name names, and they've, even though it's a pretty large firm, but they've, for their online solution, they've got a separate brand, but they still talk about the connection to the main corporate brand because that's who run the portfolios. And so they talk about the investment committee, the members of that firm. But the brand's very next generation, and the images they use on their website for that particular online solution, they've got young hipsters, and just because that's the target audience they're going for. And they've gone into sort of JVs with finance apps and some media outlets who are taking out education to the next generation. So that it makes sense that they separated it from their existing brand, although there's so much flexibility in doing something like this. And that's where I think the hybrid, we've only just recently started to discover this hybrid advice model, which everyone thought was making efficiencies in fact finding and SLAs, but a hybrid advice, it covers personal advice or general advice, and a firm is licensed to do both. And there's no fear of doing both if you're helping to serve your communities, the people who need help, and the mass market, the 90% of Australians who are just not being able to access professional help. And therefore, what they're left with is either getting a poor experience
or using AI.
Per se, yes. I mean, that
from that perspective. But yeah, it's this idea about thinking about the offering differently. I know there's been some recent research in the UK, not asking you to quote it, Ravi, because you're from the UK or anything, but it was just talking about the compliance obligations and the number of clients in the UK that have too much cash in their bank accounts, just unutilized money, that because of the fact that advisors can't advise them efficiently, there's just millions, billions of pounds not being invested that otherwise would if there was a simpler way to lead clients down a journey. Okay.
Yeah.
Because general advice is information. And so you're not understanding the client's situation, but doesn't mean you can't lead them down a particular path.
Yeah. The UK, US, they're the same. They're far more progressed in their thinking, in their regulatory regime, because obviously in the UK you've got full-blown advice and then restricted advice as well, which is just focused on one area. So yeah, they have tried to make it more accessible. But the other thing in the UK is the banks are in wealth, and most of the banks offer online investing solutions. And outside the banks, there's a plethora of online investing apps, and they're quite big. And obviously the largest being Hargreaves Lansdown, which is probably one of the largest direct-to-consumer, self-directed investing platforms in the world. And the US is the same, Europe is the same. So I think over in the UK, you're absolutely right. A lot of money sitting in cash. People are unsure what to do. And when they're unsure what to do, they either just stay in cash, or unfortunately, they are online. They're part of Reddit groups getting conned into investing money into crazy schemes. So that's what's happening over here. So being able to, I think as a country, we just need to be able to progress at a quicker pace to be able to, bring this. And hopefully the banks here will come back into wealth. They obviously all pulled out.
They're all ready. They're waiting for the laws to be tweaked, I think, and then they just push all their chips back in. Wouldn't you say, Craig?
Oh, it's going to happen.
But it's great, right? It's great when it does happen, because the banks have the relationship with millions and millions of Australians. The banks have the trust.
Yes, you're exactly the way that you said accountants can help identify investing opportunities. If you think about it through the same lens, there's the banks that have a huge amount of information on their customers. They know that they've got surplus cash, and that they, whether it's through GA or advice or some hybrid in the future, prompting them to have a consideration of their situation and then a solution makes a lot of sense. They won't make the same mistakes that they did last time. They'll make new mistakes like we all do.
Absolutely. But we can't be scared of making mistakes, or we'll never progress with the offering, what we're doing, and as an industry. And touching on the AI side of things, you just mentioned AI there. I mean,
every podcast mentions AI these days, so I've got to get one or two in. It helps with
you just build your traction up to get in the through, so you get more public.
There's some interesting AI stuff happening in the US. Some investing apps are using AI, not necessarily to run investment portfolios, but to help individuals work out what are their goals, what are their objectives. Having an AI companion to guide you through your changing circumstances, and you've had an inheritance, or you've won the lottery, or wherever you've had something happen. And so having this sort of AI co-pilot guide you through your life with real-time data, insights, and essentially curating your journey. So it's happening, and I think again that's what we'll start seeing here. And maybe we've started looking at how do we bring in AI, for example, in the communication platform layer that we've got, but also banks will be looking at this as well in terms of that customer journey. How do we help people? If it's not personal advice, if it is general advice, how do we help them go through a journey to help them decide what's best for themselves?
Indeed. And it gives us this comparison between the two. Is I think that everyone listening just reflecting on that concept is really key, that just because advisors are trained in personal advice doesn't mean that they can't have elements of general advice either in their business or in the side. Not that I'm coming from a compliance department, Craig's not coming from that in this context either, but it's good for us to all think about that in our businesses, but also as part of the solution for helping more consumers make better informed decisions about their money. The number of advisors divided by the number of Australians is not an equation that we can solve just with personal advice or online fact finds on its own. And so this is a solution to part of the consumer problem, i.e. getting good quality investment portfolios that match their risk profiles and they don't get sucked into the Bitcoin bros, is actually a really good outcome going forward.
Yeah, and I think, Dean, like, this continues on that journey that lots of advice businesses are going through, which is, where do I, as the human in this business, in my role, add value? Where do the other human beings that I have in my business in their roles add value? And then where does technology add value? And who does what and where and how? And with this stuff, I think it's important that financial advisors own the answer to this, and we don't leave it to big super funds and all of those kind of things. We're the ones at the cold face. We're the ones with the clients. If we can own the answer to this and own the solution, then I think we end up getting consumers in a better place.
Absolutely. So Craig, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Ravi, for spending the time with us and giving us a little bit of information, obviously, about what you do, but also just starting to peel this onion of layers around advice and thinking about our business in those different client segments, and then what the different deliverables are to those clients, of course. And then with the advisor hat on, the potentially two different advisor hats that people might be able to wear in businesses. So it's been a great conversation. Sincerely appreciate your time. And Craig, obviously, I also sincerely appreciate your time joining me, of course, and spending some time today.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, always great to chat with you guys. And yeah, carry on with your, what did you, 111 was this episode?
111, yeah.
Wow,
Exactly.
that's amazing. It's just, great benefit to advisors and the industry that you're talking about these sort of topics. So yeah, well done.
Cool. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.